If you're here, something in you is already shifting, a question stirring beneath the surface. A quiet itch that refuses to settle. Maybe it's the way you catch yourself doubting what you think you know, or feeling restless in the face of certainty. There's a voice from ancient times inviting you in, whispering through paradox, urging you to look deeper. That voice belongs to Socrates and, through him, Plato. I want to tell you what to think about these names. Instead, let me help you see how their philosophy draws out what is already happening inside you. The uneasy dance between knowing and not knowing, between appearances and truth. The story begins in Athens, where Socrates wandered, not with scrolls or books, but with questions. Questions that unsettled his neighbors because they begged people to look beneath their assumptions, beneath the facade of everyday conversation. Imagine him like a mirror held up to the city's soul. No flattery, just reflection. Socrates famously claimed that he knew nothing, not ignorance as defeat, but as a vantage point. What does it mean to admit you don't know? It is not surrender. It's the opening of a door. A door into a space where curiosity can breathe, where thought sharpens not by answers, but by the challenge of the question. That's the irony. We often think knowledge means certainty, but Socrates asks, what if certainty is the prison? What if wisdom begins with recognizing the elusive nature of truth? SFX, soft_wind_breeze. 3. His method, the elenchus, was a relentless questioning that peeled back layers of belief until contradictions appeared. Those contradictions weren't failures, but invitations to reconsider, to clarify what had been assumed without reflection. But here's where Plato enters the scene. Socrates' most gifted students saw the world around him haunted by shadows, a rough copy of something more real, more eternal. He imagined that behind the flickering images projecting on the walls of the cave lies a realm of perfect forms, the ideal of justice, beauty, goodness. Plato's philosophy is a journey from shadow to light, from images to reality, from opinion to knowledge. It is both a map and an aspiration. Yet, what Myles, Burnyeat and Magee reveal in their interpretations is that Plato's ideas are not distant, cold dogmas. They unfold dialogues vivid, living conversations about what it means to live a meaningful life, to understand our place in the world. They remind us that philosophy is not just theory, but a practice of care for the soul. Do you see the subtlety here? Socrates starts by dismantling certainty. Plato builds a vision that hope is found beyond the visible. Together, they embody a dialectic, the tension between doubt and belief, between questioning and seeking, that mirrors our own inner conflicts. SFX, gently enterprising _chimes. For now, consider this. What if the problem you face is not in finding the right answers, but in the way you resist the questions? When you cling to certainty, you become trapped. Socratic wisdom turns into an act of courageous unknowing, inviting you to live with questions as companions rather than enemies. Burnyeat's reflections deepen this by showing how Plato's dialogues themselves resist final interpretations. They live as openings, not closures. They are a call to continual inquiry, a refusal to let truth become comfortable or stagnant. In that light, philosophy becomes a vital process, like learning to dance with shadows and light. It's not about mastering knowledge, but cultivating a relationship with mystery. So I ask you, what if the part of you that resists uncertainty is also the part you must listen to most carefully? What fears are stirred when the ground of your certainty begins to shift? And what might emerge if you allow yourself to dwell in that space between knowing and not knowing? SFX, heartbeat_soft. 2. Plato's cave metaphor then is not a condemnation, but an invitation. The journey out of the cave is painful, yes. The sun blinds at first because it is unfamiliar. But that light is not something to conquer. It is something to befriend. The philosopher is not a hero who arrives with answers. They are more like a guide who walks beside you in darkness, illuminating a path, not by revealing all, but by nurturing the courage to keep stepping forward when the way is uncertain. According to Magee's Interviews and Explorations, Socrates and Plato challenge us to see philosophy as a way of life, a practice of attentiveness, humility, and unfailing curiosity. To live philosophically is to engage the self, not as a fixed identity, but as a question constantly unfolding. And here lies a profound gift. When you lean into this practice, that restless part of you, the parts tangled in doubt, fear, confusion, begin to transform. They become not obstacles, but thresholds. Moments that, if embraced, can lead to a richer understanding of yourself and the world. SFX, gentle_rain. For try to imagine your life as a series of dialogues, not just with others, but with your own thoughts, fears, and hopes. What would happen if, like Socrates, you refused to accept easy answers? What if, like Plato, you held a vision that life's ultimate truths are shimmering just beyond reach, inviting you to seek them patiently? This is not intellectual vanity or escapism. It is the fragile courage to meet uncertainty with openness. And so, if you find yourself trapped in conflict between who you are and who you want to be, between the need for clarity and the fear of losing ground, remember that you are participating in a philosophical lineage. A lineage that honors the tension as essential to growth. The question becomes not, how do I fix this? But, how can I live with it? How can I listen deeply and allow the dialogue within to unfold? SFX, distant_waves. 3. I offer no answers, only this. Your journey is a dialogue in motion. Socrates and Plato don't belong to a dusty past. They belong to this moment. You are that moment, walking, questioning, seeking. And in that seeking, your soul is waking up. What new questions do you hear stirring inside you now? SFX, faint_tone. 2. Perhaps the very act of asking is the answer you need most. Let me bring you closer to the heart of this philosophical unfolding. Socrates and Plato, as explored by Burnyeat and Magee, are not just relics of a distant intellectual tradition. They are mirrors held up to the human condition, previews of the incessant dialogue inside each of us that questions, doubts, hopes, and doubts again. Burnyeat, a master interpreter of Plato, often emphasized something subtle but crucial. Plato did not write to provide neat doctrines. His dialogues are crafted to unsettle the reader, requiring active participation. Each dialogue invites you to step into the conversation, question, resist, and sometimes accept being left with ambiguity. This is vital because it reveals the process of philosophy as a lived experience it's not about receiving conclusions handed down like laws. It's about engaging in a tender tango with ideas that invite transformation rather than dictated. Think of it like this: philosophy as a dance rather than a march. You don't always know the next step, but every movement has meaning. And when you dance with Socrates' questions and Plato's visions, you're learning to listen to your own inner rhythms with greater clarity. SFX, soft_chimes, for Bryan Magee, in his many interviews and writings, brings a warm, accessible lens to these ancient mysteries. He understood that philosophy's greatest gift isn't abstract knowledge, it's the capacity to help us navigate the complexity of being human. Magee often spoke about the importance of philosophical humility, the willingness to admit that we don't have the final answers and that some questions may never be fully resolved. This humility opens the door to freedom, because when you let go of the need for certainty, you can engage your inner world more honestly. It was until he felt the sharp sting of feeling lost. Maybe your mind is crowded with contradictions. You can't resolve desires pulling you different ways. Beliefs once held true, now unraveling. Socrates would see this as the beginning of wisdom, the fertile ground from which genuine insight springs. It's easy to think that not knowing is a flaw or failure. The Socratic paradox flips this idea. Not knowing is the starting point, the spark that lights the fire of inquiry. So here's a question for you, gently offered. What if your confusion, your doubt, your restless questions are not barriers, but gateways? What if they're Socratic invitations nudging you to examine what you really value, what you've inherited uncritically? What parts of yourself remain unacknowledged? This process can be uncomfortable. It might feel like wandering in darkness. Plato's allegory of the cave reminds us of that, but it also shows us the possibility of emerging into a broader, truer light. The journey outwards is also a journey inwards. SFX, deep_with_, 2 Myles Burnyeat's notable insight was to emphasize how Plato's conception of the forms should not be misunderstood as distant ethereal entities. Instead, they are ideals imperfectly realized in our world that beckon us toward the best versions of concepts like justice, beauty, courage, and goodness. In this light, Plato's forms are not abstractions removed from lived reality. They function as guides for personal and communal transformation. They stretch us beyond complacency, inviting us to reflect on what we mean by the qualities we often take for granted. These ideals create tension because they highlight the gap between who we are and who we might become. Have you noticed this tension in your life? That uncomfortable feeling where your actions or beliefs don't quite align with an inner sense of what is right or good. Philosophy, following this tradition, serves as a compass here, not to cast judgment, but to lucidly reveal the discrepancies, shadows on the cave wall, and help you discern the shapes more clearly. SFX, pages_running_softly. 3 Magee also observe how Socrates and Plato's legacy lies in their unwavering commitment to dialogue. Philosophy is not a monologue within your own mind, but a conversation sometimes with others, sometimes with different parts of yourself. This dialogical nature means that philosophy becomes an ongoing project rather than a final answer. We trust that truth is not static. It emerges through questioning, revising, reflecting. So if you are battling feelings of fragmentation, if your identity feels like a patchwork of conflicting parts, what if philosophy offers a way to gently bring those fragments into relationship? Not forcing coherence, but inviting understanding and integration through dialogue. Remember, Socratic questioning is not about tearing down to leave ruins. It is about clearing space so new growth can emerge. It is a form of care for your own soul. SFX, come_water_flow. 5 here is a reflection to hold close. Plato's cave is not just a myth about ignorance. It's a metaphor for the human tendency to mistake appearances for reality, habits for identity, noise for truth. But the journey out of the cave is not a heroic seizure of knowledge. It is a painful revealing of how much we have lived in shadows and a gentle invitation to turn towards light, even if it dazzles us at first. How does this relate to your own life? What shadows might you be mistaking for reality? And what would it take to turn just a little towards something truer, even if it unsettles everything you thought you knew about yourself? SFX, soft_leaves, for Burnyeat and Magee both highlight that the philosophical life is also a moral journey. Philosophy asks, what is the good life? What does it mean to live rightly, not just intellectually, but ethically? Socrates' life itself models this question. He drinks hemlock rather than betray his commitment to truth and inquiry. His courage resonates across millennia as a testament to living in alignment with what one holds sacred. Plato extends this by imagining a just society ruled by philosopher kings, not rulers with mere power, but souls deeply attuned to the forms and the welfare of the whole. You're not asked to adopt this vision as dogma. Rather, you are invited to consider how your own values and ideals shape how you live, relate, and grow. SFX, heartbeat_steady. 3 philosophy, then, is not a luxury for the elite. It is an urgent practice for anyone caught at crossroads, anyone wrestling with identity, meaning, and transformation. It's a practice of ongoing self-examination, challenging us not to accept easy narratives, but to hold complexity with patience and grace. And in this dance of questions and answers, doubt and hope, light and shadow, you are not alone. Socrates' voice, Plato's vision, Burnyeat's interpretation, Magee's warmth, their companions whispering across time, inviting you to think deeply, live truly, and awaken. So, I'll leave you with a final question. If you could meet Socrates or Plato today, not as ancient philosophers, but as companions in your own journey, what would you ask them? And more importantly, what question within yourself would you dare to voice? SFX, Feina Chime. 2. Because perhaps the conversation you most need to hear is the one waiting quietly inside.